What's up, and welcome to another edition of the Cover 2 Recap. I'm BruinSportsport.com publisher Edward Lewis. As always, this is the UCLA beat writer for the OC Register, Ryan Karchi. We're here tonight in Tempe, where UCLA just romped Arizona State 62-27. Ryan, Brett Hundley had a career night, maybe the best he's ever played at UCLA. Tell me about his night and what you thought of, maybe his Heisman candidacy coming back.
I would pretty confidently say this is the best game I've seen him play. I mean, his stat line, 18 of 23. Two of those balls were blatant drops from Kenny Walker. Not even his fault. 355 yards, 4 touchdowns, 76 yards on the ground, and another touchdown. I mean, per attempt, he was throwing 15 yards per attempt. We're talking about, that's a number that ranks, if you're talking about over the course of the season, that's 3 full yards better than the top, number in the entire nation. So Brett Hundley was masterful tonight, and I think you saw a little bit of extra motivation from him. He said, he heard people talking about him being one-dimensional, about how he wasn't going to be able to run. Well, he definitely proved those people wrong by hurdling a player completely. So he was clearly not hampered much by the elbow. I know he said that he had a little bit of movement issues, but this was just a fantastic game from Brett Hundley. And I think, we talked about him maybe falling out of the Heisman candidacy, but all told, I think he's been pretty good. I mean, especially maybe not after that first game, but great game against Memphis, was hurt against Texas, and today he looked like a Heisman candidate tonight.
Yeah, outside of that Virginia game and obviously the Texas game, I mean, he had a great game against Memphis, great game tonight. They play Oregon, against the Heisman candidacy leader in Marcus Mariota. If he outperforms him there, I mean, who knows where that goes from. But the UCLA offense in general, they played a great game tonight, only gave it 1 sack on the offensive line. Paul Perkins rushed for more than 100 yards. Jordan Payton kind of did his thing as another number 1 wide receiver. Tell me about that offense and what it means for UCLA going forward here.
Well, I think what was such a big deal was the big plays they had. I mean, you're talking about 2 80-yard touchdowns, and at that point, when you're expanding the field like that, you're going to open up holes. I mean, Paul Perkins, his total, I think he had 137 yards. A little bit misleading just because he had one 81-yard rush, but still an 81-yard rush. So at this point, two back-to-back 100-yard rush games from Paul Perkins. It's clear he's turned a corner. But like you said, I think I was most impressed by the offensive line. They looked good. I mean, they even lost, I would say, arguably their best lineman of the year so far. Alex Redmond was out for most of the game. Kenny Lacy stepped in pretty seamlessly, and they look great. I mean, Arizona State threw just as much pressure as anyone else did, maybe a little less than Virginia, but still a lot of pressure, and they handled it fine.
Defensively was kind of the one knock, I guess you could throw at UCLA, although I'm not even so sure it was. They ran 105 plays against UCLA's defense, and then we were down there on the field in the fourth quarter, late fourth quarter. It had to be 10:30 at night or whatever, and it was hot. I mean, you could see steam rising from the field. So, I mean, you run 105 plays on somebody in that kind of heat, you're probably going to give up some yards. But on the flip side, Fabian Moreau looked really bad. Priest Willis gave up a bunch of passes as well. So what does UCLA take out of this performance defensively?
Well, I think it definitely needs more defensively, but it also isn't, like you said, it isn't as bad as, you look at 626 yards allowed and you think, oh my God, they must have been horrible. Definitely not that bad when you consider, like you said, 6 yards per play, not that terrible in the Pac-12. It's one of those situations where stats can be a little misleading, but defensive coordinator Jeff Ulbrich said afterwards that, they obviously have a ways to go still. I mean, they obviously need to improve their pass rush. 1 sack, again. I mean, at this point they have, 4 sacks in 4 games. That's just not acceptable for a team who, had a guy last year who could get 4 sacks in 1 game. So at this point, they really need to improve on that, and I think that'll probably trickle down to help the secondary a little bit. I know Jeff Ulbrich said they threw a little bit more variety in there today, but I don't know. I didn't really see all that much. I mean, obviously, I don't know the game plan necessarily, but I think UCLA fans would like to see more blitzes, and I tend to agree with them. I think there needs to be a little bit more pressure.
Sure did look like a whole lot of 4-man pressures and not a whole lot of blitzing or anything kind of too extreme. So I think you do need to see that a little bit going forward. One thing I wanted to talk about here before we wrapped up on the Cover 2 recap was the scratching of UCLA's name inside of the pitchfork. I mean, it created kind of national headlines, big-time story. A lot of people here. The buzz was that Brett Hundley did it. We asked him after if he did it, and he said no. But, man, he sure gave off the vibe that, yeah, I did it. But tell me about your thoughts on that.
There was definitely a vibe among the players that one of them did it. You kind of got that impression when we asked Thomas Duarte about it. And I thought it was funny because the Arizona State players were pretty offended, it seemed like, by the whole thing. But Thomas Duarte said he couldn't help but laugh when he saw how quickly the ASU personnel came over to block it and paint it off. My question is, how does that happen without anyone noticing? Especially if it's Brett Hundley. That's the one thing that makes me wonder if someone of that repute that's actually being watched by people could pull something like that off. I don't know. He looked a little sly when he was talking about it.
It's pretty cool that this rivalry is kind of now stepping up on that USC UCLA level. Obviously not to that extreme, but it's getting there to that point where these two teams clearly don't like each other. Lastly, I wanted to get into going forward what this means. Big win, 62 points on the road. ASU is supposed to be the Pac-12 South leader, defending champions. What does this mean? This win mean going forward?
I don't necessarily want to stop on a dime and change in a different direction about what this win means, but I think it's huge. I mean, I think it's one of the biggest statement wins they could have all season long. And the fact that they won so handily, like after just barely beating three other teams who they were expected to just blow out, they actually blew out a team that they were expected to be close with. I mean, before the game, I picked them to win 28-27. I got the ASU score right. I was only 34 points off of UCLA's score. But at this point, I think this is one of those wins they needed for their confidence. I mean, as much as they weren't saying that it affected them that they barely beat these teams, it clearly did. I mean, a game like this, when you play against a team, this game has decided the South Division winner the last 3 years. When you walk out of here knowing that you just absolutely massacred this team, you have to feel good. I mean, the players afterwards just seem different than they did in the other games, no matter what they would say. So I think going forward, I mean, this is the kind of win you want to have, a few weeks before Oregon. I think it's 2 weeks now until that game comes. Utah will be tough next week. I think if they can handle them, you're setting up for a game that is going to have some serious implications nationally in Oregon.
Big win. As always, you can follow Ryan's coverage of the win on Twitter at Ryan_Karchi. You can follow me on Twitter at EdwardLewisBSR. Until the next time, thanks for tuning in to the Cover 2 Recap.